Welcome into Steelers Talk. I'm your host, Jack Sperry. Today we got a big injury update for Aaron Rodgers just now from Adam Schefter and Tom Pelissero that I want to share with you guys, as well as some of my other notes after I've had a chance now to watch this Week 11 win for the Steelers over the Cincinnati Bengals over again. So make sure you guys click that subscribe button if you haven't already. We had another awesome watch party today, guys. Thank you so much for all the Super Chat donations. Thank you guys so much for coming and hanging out with us here today. Make sure you click that subscribe button if you haven't already, because we're going to get you guys not only this video here tonight, but we'll also have another video come out tomorrow morning and another one after that in the evening. And of course, we'll go live on Tuesday and Thursday, getting ready for this big time matchup versus the Chicago Bears coming up next Sunday in the Windy City. So make sure you click that subscribe button if you haven't already. Now let's get right into the update here from Adam Schefter, Tom Pelissero, and others, which is that the Steelers fear that Aaron Rodgers has a quote-unquote slight break in his wrist that he suffered today at the end of the first half in today's game versus the Cincinnati Bengals. And now Tom Pelissero does say in his report that the injury is not expected to be quote-unquote long-term. It is worth noting that the break is in Rodgers' non-throwing hand, so that obviously is going to speed up recovery time. If this was to Rodgers' throwing hand, guys, it would be a pretty significant recovery time before he would be ready to throw. So the fact that this happened to his other wrist, not his throwing wrist, it pretty much allows Rodgers a chance to come back and play this year. But he was seen in a brace after the game. And according to a report, Rodgers actually tried to get the Steelers training staff to allow him to go back in the game today, but he was obviously shut down after x-rays showed that he had a fracture in his wrist. Now tomorrow he's going to be undergoing more tests. He's going to be getting evaluated. Obviously do all those things to kind of determine the severity of the injury and how long he is going to have to be out. Like I said, he was seen in a brace after the game, and it looked pretty bulky. So it's going to be interesting to see, how long it takes before he can go down to maybe a slightly less bulky wrist. And when he comes back, is he going to be able to take snaps from under center? Is he going to have to go heavy shotgun? And I just don't know if that's the style of offense the Pittsburgh Steelers want to run. I would almost rather put Mason Rudolph out there to allow this offense to be able to operate under center. I mean, we've seen guys like Ryan Tannehill, kind of like a Mason Rudolph style of quarterback, play very efficiently and play very well in this Arthur Smith style of offense. I mean, we saw Mason play very well today, 12 of 16, had a couple of missed throws, he underthrew a couple, but he played pretty well today, man. He really did. He distributed the ball well. He was reading the defense as well. He was standing and delivering in the pocket. Mason Rudolph is more than functional in this Steelers offense. And, if Rodgers can't take snaps from under center and would have to go all shotgun, I honestly think, I would rather go with Mason Rudolph as the starting quarterback until Rodgers' wrist heals enough where he can take snaps from under center from Zach Frazier, who is kind of known for snapping it pretty darn hard. So it's going to be interesting to see over the next few weeks because, if this is a pretty slight injury and, he can wear a brace and play on it, it's going to be interesting to see if he can play as early as next week. I know he wants to play in Chicago next week. That is a game that he has had circled on his calendar for a long time. Not as much as the Green Bay game or the Jet game, but he loves playing in Chicago, and this might be his last opportunity to play in the Windy City before he retires. So it'd be a big bummer if he wasn't able to play there. But if that's the case, I have a lot of confidence in Mason Rudolph to be able to execute the offense at a good enough level. I have a lot of confidence in the Steelers defense right now. They have put together 3 pretty darn good performances. I like their cornerback setup, especially on the outside. Speaking of that, I want to say, man, I really regret not giving James Pierre a game ball. Those are one of those things where, I'm putting together a game balls list at the end of the game and just something slips my mind. But he certainly earned a game ball this week. So if I can put, a final game ball there, if you've already watched our instant reaction video, didn't give Pierre a game ball, but he certainly deserved it today. And then Joey Porter Jr., I think, has played pretty darn well in coverage. He's had a couple penalties this year, but in general, he has been shutting guys down in man coverage, which is really good to see. That Brandon Echols, even though he dealt with some injuries, played pretty decently in the slot today. And, I thought the safety tandem and Jalen Ramsey, Kyle Duggar played pretty darn well. Now, back to the quarterback discussion here, with 3 legitimate playoff contenders coming up next on the docket. Okay, for the Steelers, they've got the Bears, who once again won today. Then you got the Bills at home the following week, and then you get the Ravens on the road. Okay, if Mason Rudolph is tasked with playing in 2 or even 3 of those ball games, and the Steelers, play very well on offense, if the offense finds a groove, and if the Steelers win those ball games, I think it's going to be tough to take him out. I really do, because, even though, if Rodgers is good to go next week, I don't think Mason necessarily showed enough today to be like, okay, Mason's our guy moving forward. But if he puts together like another 2 or 3 more good performances, and this offense finds a groove that frankly they haven't been able to find under Rodgers over the last month, I think, especially if you're beating playoff caliber teams, man, you got to stick with the hot hand until the hot hand cools down, at least. So, this is an awesome opportunity for Mason Rudolph, who, is kind of Ryan Tannehill-like. Now, he's not quite as athletic as Tannehill was. Tannehill could actually run with the football a little bit. But both guys, very proficient under center. Both guys can throw the ball down the field, kind of similar throwing motions as well. I certainly think Mason Rudolph can kind of thrive in this Arthur Smith offense, if I'm being completely honest with you. I don't think he's necessarily like a top 20 or top 25 quarterback in the world. I think he's more like maybe top 35 or top 30, maybe top 40. But I think this is the style of offense that he can operate pretty efficiently. And frankly, Rodgers has really struggled over really the last month. Ever since he really lit it up against Cincinnati on Thursday night, he has really not played fantastically. And the offense hasn't played very well in general. So I'm looking forward to seeing what Mason is going to be able to do potentially in the next couple weeks. But if Rodgers is good to go next week, I'll be excited to see what Rodgers can do in Chicago. I know that's a game that he really wants to play in and he'll be highly motivated in. And I know he probably wants to bounce back after kind of 2 definitely down weeks for him. And I'm sure that he wants to get back out there and not give Mason Rudolph a shot to win this job down the stretch. But right now, I don't think there's necessarily a controversy, but, give it another 2 or 3 weeks of Mason Rudolph playing well against good teams that are probably going to be making the playoffs, and this team getting on a hot streak, and, it gets a lot harder, and, the discussion definitely picks up. So keep your eye on that. But I will say, even with Mason Rudolph in there, just some points on the game itself today and some of my thoughts on the Steelers to kind of finish up today's video. The Steelers offense still very much relies on yards after the catch. I mean, the Steelers right now, I think, have an NFL record in terms of percentage of their passing yardage coming after the catch. I mean, going into today's game, I think it was over 68%. And then I think today, at least over 85% of their yardage today in the passing game was after the catch, okay? And, that's going to bring up the total for the season, maybe up to even like 70, which is just absolutely nuts to have 70% of your pass yardage come after the catch. I mean, that's all underneath stuff. That's Darnell Washington running people over. That's Jaylen Warren making people miss. That's Kenny Gainwell making some big things happen. And, DK Metcalf's getting doubled, and Roman Wilson and Calvin Austin aren't getting open enough, at least not for these quarterbacks, to trust them enough. And they're going to have to, if they want to be anything come playoff time, in my opinion, guys, that's not sustainable. They have to start throwing the ball more down the field. And I certainly think having that ground and pound run game under center, play action can certainly open some things up. But right now, I mean, on the season, if 70% of your yardage is coming after the catch, I mean, that would be an NFL record. Like I don't think any other NFL team this year is above 60, and the Steelers are either at 70 or maybe even above 70 after today's game. So that's something that this team, whether it's with Aaron Rodgers at quarterback, Mason Rudolph, hell, even Will Howard, like they got to find some solution, all right, to get people off of DK Metcalf. And I really think that the answer to that question, guys, is it's going to come down to Roman Wilson and Calvin Austin. Maybe Marquez Valdes-Scantling gets in the mix, but really I think if you're going to open things up for DK, if you're going to open things up for other people, and you want to kind of rely less on the yards after the catch, then, Roman and Calvin are going to have, one of those two or both are going to have to step up in a pretty major way down the stretch. And we saw a little flash from Roman today, but Roman got more snaps than Calvin did today and still only had 1 catch. So Certainly not enough from Roman, even though he did have that big third down and very long conversion. That was a really good flash, but we need to see more than that. If you're going to be a legit number 2 receiver and get number 2 receiver snaps, you're going to have to provide more than just one catch in a ball game. So hopefully this was maybe a sign of things to come, and maybe hopefully we can see it more consistently from Roman in weeks to come. But we're just going to have to see. Also, I want to point out here that the Ravens did win today. Shadur Sanders went 4 of 16, had to come in for the injured Dylan Gabriel. Shadur Sanders was absolutely terrible. I mean, I can't believe people in this fan base were adamant that they wanted this team to draft him in the first round this year. I mean, that would have been a disaster. So, Browns had a chance. They were leading for a lot of that ball game. Ravens didn't look particularly good today. They certainly look beatable. I'll say that. So the Ravens currently sit at 5-5. They've won 4 straight games. They are still just 1 game behind the Steelers. So the Steelers got to keep it going next week in Chicago, who is a very beatable team. I mean, the Steelers should absolutely win that football game next week, in my opinion. And the Ravens have the New York Jets. So this will be a big week coming up for the AFC North and the race to win this division. But then just some final notes here to kind of wrap up today's show. I really think, and I said this a lot on the post on the watch party today, with the way Darnell Washington and Pat Freiermuth play the game, man, Pat only had 1 catch today, but he took it for 19 yards, had an awesome run after catch. Then Darnell had multiple of them today. I think he was second on the team in receiving. He was stellar today. Jonnu Smith had 2 targets for 0 catches and doesn't block, had a face mask penalty. Jonnu Smith cannot be a starter on this team anymore. I know he's Arthur Smith's guy for whatever reason, but Arthur Smith likes guys that block. Why does he like Jonnu Smith as much as he likes him? I just don't get it, especially with how good Pat and Darnell have been for this team this year. And, those 2 guys can be game changers for this team, not to mention the jumbo personnel looks that they run here in Pittsburgh. So I think moving forward, Jonnu Smith has to be delegated to tight end 3, tight end 4 duties. I mean, I would even consider playing him less than Spencer Anderson at jumbo tight end. Just because he doesn't provide all that much to you. He doesn't provide, really a lot of yak ability. He doesn't provide route running. Doesn't provide, good hands to win contested catch situations. He doesn't block. There's just nothing that Jonnu Smith provides for the Steelers offense. So Arthur Smith has to wake up to that fact, and they got to get him off the field. I know they paid him a lot of money, so they want to use him, but at the end of the day, the best players have got to play, and the players that aren't contributing need to be sit on the bench. And that is, unfortunately, Jonnu Smith at this point. Also, with Jaylen Warren having an injury today, he had an ankle injury. We're going to see probably on Tomlin Tuesday what that is and what the extent to that is. But that could mean more opportunities here for Caleb Johnson. And even though he had kind of a rookie mistake again today with the face mask penalty on a pretty darn good run on the outside, he's shown some good things. He really has over the last 3 weeks in a very limited sample size. He has shown some really good stuff on film. As a runner, and I'm really excited to see, even when Jaylen gets back, get Caleb some of that early down work and get Jaylen out there a little bit more on third downs. And, Kenny Gainwell has certainly shown himself to be a more than serviceable third down back throughout this season. He had 2 touchdowns today. But Caleb Johnson is probably the future at the early down running back position here in Pittsburgh, and he's starting to show some of the potential and the promise there. So I'm looking forward to seeing him get maybe an increased workload as the season continues on. Also, Broderick Jones, big shout out to Broderick today. He battled through a groin injury all week long to get himself ready to play. And then he had a foot issue that popped up today, and he played through all of it. And he played pretty well today, okay? He wasn't perfect, but I thought he played pretty well. I'm looking forward to seeing what the film says tomorrow. But, I want to give a big shout out to the toughness of Broderick Jones for sticking it out and, just showing that toughness today. Then moving on to the defensive side of the ball, once again, Steelers played a lot of split safety, of course, with Jalen Ramsey and Kyle Duggar. Then they brought in Chuck Clark at the end of the game. But what that did and what was the big difference in this ball game defensively, guys, compared to Week 7 was they played a lot of single high versus Jamar Chase and Joe Flacco and the Bengals back in Week 7, and they played a lot of man. And they got killed. This week they played a lot more zone. They played a lot more split field coverages, quarters, and I'm looking forward to seeing what the scheme breakdown kind of looks like tomorrow on film. But they were in split safety pre-snap, 29 of Flacco's 41 dropbacks. So that is a majority of the time, and that's exactly what you want to see. I mean, when you play split safety, you can kind of be more ambiguous to the quarterback, and could certainly tell Flacco had to hold on to the ball for longer than he's used to in this ball game. So good job on the Steelers defense. Did a really, really good job in this one. And they got after the quarterback. Obviously, James Pierre and Joey Porter Jr. were terrific. The safety play from Ramsey and Duggar was really good again this week. Brandon Echols, I thought, had his best game in the slot. Didn't have as many losses as he did against Indianapolis and the Chargers the previous 2 weeks. This defense honestly continues to get better, and they had a hell of a performance against a Bengals offense that's like not bad. Like, they've put up a lot of yardage, a lot of points since Joe Flacco was traded there. That was probably their worst performance, maybe outside of the Packer game, but they really honed in today. Obviously, 2 defensive touchdowns. Big shout out to Terrell Austin and the Steelers defense for really figuring it out here over the last month, and now this defense finally has hit their stride as we really head down the home stretch of this season. And then the final thing I want to talk about today is that Gerry Dulac said today on his pregame show with whoever he does his pregame show with about Asante Samuel Jr. He said this, quote, "They want to make sure that Asante gets back up to speed. This guy hasn't played since week 4 of last year. They really liked his recovery. That's why they signed him, but it's still going to be a while. They just want to make sure he's back up to practice speed and then full game speed before they use him." So essentially, especially with James Pierre playing as well as he's playing, guys, I just don't know if it makes sense to rush Asante Samuel Jr. out there. He's played pretty much exclusively on the outside his entire playing career. And now I think next week the Steelers should elevate him onto the active roster so that he can't decide to, get poached somewhere like Philadelphia, for example. We'll see how the Eagles do tonight on Sunday Night Football with their cornerback situation. But Asante Samuel Jr. Obviously needs to get ramped up. This is the start of his essentially training camp, and he's going to have to, expedite the process of learning the playbook and getting himself up to playing shape and getting himself ready to play. Who knows how long that process takes? Could take him, another week, and he's ready to play. Versus Chicago, maybe as a backup or maybe even as a slot corner. We'll see what their kind of plan is for him because, listen, man, it's going to be tough to move James Pierre off the starting lineup just because of the way he's playing. I mean, the amount of PBUs that this guy's had in 3 weeks and really 2.5 games of game reps has been unbelievable. Teams keep trying to pick on him and target him, and he is just not letting anything happen. He's got long arms. He's physical. He plays with good technique. He had a really good preseason as well and really good camp, and he was just someone that consistently flashed in training camp practices and during the preseason games, which is what makes me think that this is sustainable for James Pierre, which is really exciting if you're a Pittsburgh Steelers fan, to have a guy like this that you just fall into. Darius Slay, hopefully he can maybe get back next week so he can be a backup outside corner. But certainly I think that, I can't believe I'm saying this, but Gerry Dulac may be right here, that the Steelers are going to take their time with Asante Samuel Jr. It might even be another week before they consider adding him to the game day roster. But, the longer the Steelers wait to add him to, the active roster, if there's other teams out there like the Eagles that need players now, Asante might decide to go elsewhere. So the Steelers have to kind of find that right balance and kind of come up with a plan that works for them and works for Asante. But certainly going to be interesting to watch over the next few weeks. All right, guys, that's going to be it for today's show. Again, kind of the headliner for today's show, Aaron Rodgers. The fear is he has a slight break in his wrist. He's getting more evaluations done tomorrow. Should have more answers as to how long he's going to be out. But with a very important slate of games coming up against playoff caliber teams for this football team, if Mason Rudolph and this offense finds a groove, I think it's gonna some conversations are gonna get really interesting here in the Steel City. So I think that the interesting discussions and all that stuff for this season are just getting started here on Steelers Talk. So click that subscribe button if you haven't already for all the latest juicy happenings surrounding the Pittsburgh Steelers this year. And until tomorrow morning, guys, here we go, Steelers.